on behalf of the Non-Aligned Movement, as well as the statement delivered by Iraq on behalf of G77 plus China, as well as the statement delivered by Eritrea on behalf of a group of friends in defense of the Charter. We wish to deliver the following remarks in our national capacity. First and foremost, we wish to welcome His Excellency Mr. Bruno Rodriguez Barria, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Cuba. We reiterate the steadfast, unstinting support of the Syrian Arab Republic for the brotherly country of Cuba and its people. We support the resistance against the unjust, illegal American embargo which has been imposed since 1962. We appreciate the position of Cuba supporting my country in the face of the terrorist threat that we have been victimized by, and the presence of the illegitimate foreign presence on our soil, as well as the constraining, inhumane, unilateral measures that have been imposed. We stress our full commitment and our full support for United Nations resolutions calling for the immediate lifting of the economic, commercial and financial embargo imposed against Cuba. This is a flagrant violation of the tenets of international law and relevant instruments related to human rights, as well as international law. We will continue to vote in favor of the draft resolution submit to us. This is on the basis of our conviction as to the just nature of Cuba's position, the injustice of unacceptable collective punishment being waged against the fraternal Cuban people. Every year, the UN General Assembly renews its call for the successive U.S. administrations to lift the unjust embargo against Cuba and to revisit this destructive policy of imposing unilateral illegal sanctions against Cuba, as well as the attempts geared towards isolating Cuba and destroying its national economy and stripping it of its basic needs, including provisions of fuel, by intimidating both the government and banking institutions, as well as commercial enterprises and freight businesses inter alia, targeting all sources of national revenue, including tourism. The regular reports of the Secretary General and the report that the Cuban delegation kindly made public to member states constitute irrefutable evidence of the suffering endured by the Cuban people. This is a consequence of the coercive measures that have been imposed for several decades. The figures reflect the degree of damage endured by Cuba, as well as the daily losses as a consequence of the stifling, illegal embargo. The ongoing nature of this damage cannot be tolerated. The people of Cuba have always stood up for international law, stood up for the principles of the Charter of the United Nations and the values of justice, equality, and equity. And the people of Cuba have always responded to calls for humanitarian and medical assistance in all parts of the world. Cuba has provided an example for all states in the world, showing solidarity during the COVID-19 pandemic and in its fight against natural disasters which our countries have faced, including Syria. We stress that the U.S. embargo imposed against Cuba is a flagrant violation, an organized violation against the human rights of the Cuban people, including their right to development. And this embargo was and remains the main obstacle to progress at the economic level and obstructs the achievement of the SDGs and Agenda 2030. What is worse, the U.S. administration has not merely imposed this inhumane, illegal blockade, but they have also inscribed Cuba on the list of what they have unjustly called the list of state sponsors of terrorism. This list reflects the violation by the U.S. administration of international law and the principle of the sovereign equality among states, as well as the principle of friendly relations and cooperation amongst countries. And this list needs to immediately, unconditionally be eliminated. The Syrian Arab Republic, Mr. President, is experiencing a situation that is similar to that of Cuba and a number of other countries. We have been targeted by numerous coercive unilateral measures imposed by the United States of America, as well as imposed by the European Union illegally and unilaterally. And this is outside of the framework of the United Nations and illegitimate under international law. This is represented in economic terrorism, which is supplementing the terrorism that has been and continues to be exercised by such terrorist organizations as Daesh and al-Nusra. This terrorism afflicts the daily lives of all Syrian people, stripping these people of their basic needs and constrains the ability of the Syrian government to deliver services and support to help improve the humanitarian economic situation and to help increase the number of refugees returning to the countries and to host refugees in neighboring countries as a result of the current situation. Once again, we call for the unconditional, full lifting of the unilateral coercive measures imposed against numerous countries and for the policy of imposing such measures to be put to an end. And we call for the lifting of this obstacle to enjoyment of human rights, including the right to economic development and the right to social prosperity. The Syrian Arab Republic supports our brothers and sisters in Cuba. We support their resistance to this inhumane embargo imposed by the United States of America. We call for more international efforts to ensure that the principles of the Charter are made a reality, to end the policy of isolation of countries and collective punishment imposed against countries. There's a need to respect sovereignty of states and to respect their will of their people without interference in their domestic affairs, and for attempts at regime change to be rebuffed, and for the advancement of political and economic enjoyment to be achieved. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement. And I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Zimbabwe.
We continue to listen to some statements, in this case from the permanent representative of Syria before the UN, as all the members that have stuck until now have jointly condemned and called for an immediate end of the U.S. blockade against Cuba. Stay tuned for more in teleSUR English.